In order to demonstrate squash and stretch and anticipation, we're going to create a simple bouncing ball animation. So create a new composition. I'll name this one Bouncing Ball. 1920 by 1080, 3 seconds. Say OK. I'm going to put that up in my comps folder just to be organized. And I'm going to use the shape tool, the ellipse tool, to create a shape. I'm going to create a simple circle. After you start to drag, hold down the command and the shift key, and that will make it a perfect circle. I'm going to give it no stroke, and I think I'll make the fill just white. For this to work correctly, we need to have the anchor point in the right place. In this case, the anchor point needs to be at the center bottom of our circle. So I'm going to deselect and then reselect and select my pan behind anchor point tool up here at the top, and then move the anchor point, which is right here, to the bottom center of my circle. You want to do this before you create any animation. Now I'm going to put a guide down here that will be my plane on which my ball will bounce. So I'm going to show my rulers, Command R, drag down a guide somewhere like this. And I'm going to start at 10 frames. Be sure you switch back to your selection tool, and I can drag my ball down to this position. Hold down the Option key and hit P, R, S. So that'll automatically open up position, scale, and rotation and create a keyframe for each of those properties. I'm going to use my quick key command, which is Command Shift and right arrow to move out 10 frames and then bring my ball up. That's about how high it's going to go. Then another 10 and bring it back down to my floor. Then I'll go out 5, bring it back up, and 5, bring it back down. Then I'll just go down 3. So each time I'm getting less high and less far away as far as time goes. Now I can adjust these to make these a little bit farther apart if I wish. You can fine-tune these, and then at the end I'm going to just pull it out and have it stop. I'm going to shorten my work area, and let's play this and see what it looks like. Okay. Now for squash and stretch. First of all, I want to have a little anticipation. So I'm going to go to the beginning of my comp, and I'll put keyframes for position and scale. Scale is going to be at 100, 100, and at 0. At 5, I'm going to squash it a little bit and rotate it slightly so that I start getting a sense of anticipation. So if I scale it wider, so this is a squash, then I have to scale it. If I scale it bigger in one dimension, I have to scale it narrower or less than in the other one. The point is you want to keep the overall sense of volume the same. Then I've got a keyframe for that. I'm going to rotate it slightly. So, and I think I'll move it back slightly in position. So I've got it coming back, it's rotating. Now as it starts to go, it's going to start going up. Just go ahead 1 frame, and I'm going to make it stretch. So it'll have to get more narrow, and it'll have to get taller, and then it has to rotate in the direction of my motion path. So we've got a little anticipation, starting to go up, and then as it goes up to the top, just before the top, I'm going to change everything back to 100, 100, and 0 for my rotation. So when it gets to the top, goes up, and then as it starts to come down, I'm going to choose my keyframes that I already created for my squash and stretch to keep it the same. So here's my squash and stretch. This is my, I'm going to choose the keyframes for the stretch part of the squash and stretch. So that's right here. So I can copy these, and I'll take them over, and just one after the top, one frame after being on the top, I'll paste those. I'll have to change the rotation. Now I could move those out one, copy and paste, so it's a perfect circle for a little while, and then it turns, starts going down, and again just before the bottom, I'll paste in the 100, 100, and 0. Go one frame, copy and paste that, and then as it turns to go up, I'll copy and paste the stretch. So it comes down, turns, goes up. Just before it hits the top, it goes back to 100, 100, and 0. That goes for on the way down. And then we'll switch to the stretch. Then it comes down. Now actually when it hits the bottom, I would like it to squash a little bit. So I'm going to copy the frames that are 100, 100 as far as the scale goes, and 0 for rotation. Copy those. And just before it hits the bottom, I'll paste those. And then when it hits the bottom, I'm going to squash it a little bit. So that would be like this, and then down slightly. I'm going to do that same squash on the previous descent. So like right down here, it's going to squash, and then it goes up, down, squash. This will stay at 100, 100, 0. So copy these, and then we don't have much room to do the stretch, but I'll try it. A little bit of stretch. It has to rotate in the correct direction, and I think I'll make it much less pronounced. And then at the top, I'll have it go to my 0, 0 since we're basically out of room. I'll have it change to the stretch right away as it's going down. Rotate it the other direction, and when it hits, I'll do the squash. Grab this one. This is the squash. It'll squash, and then it'll go to 100, 100, 0. So we've got squash, 100, 100, and then it rolls out. All right, so let's play that. A little bit of anticipation, bounce, bounce. Let's go through it more slowly. Anticipation goes 100, 100, 0. Then it distorts. It does the stretch and the rotation. Goes back to 100, 100, 0. And then stretches on the way down. 100, 100, squash. Then it starts going up. Squash, stretch, slight stretch, squash, and rolls out. Now whenever it's on the top, I want to change the keyframe to an easy ease, and I want to make it a little bit wider in here and go into my graph editor and slow it down a little bit. Okay, then I'll come down. Now when it hits down, I'd actually like this to be a linear keyframe, both linear temporal and linear spatial on the position. So I could select the position keyframe, right click and go to Keyframe Interpolation. So here we have the temporal is at linear. I'm going to make the spatial also linear. I think that's going to give it more of a hard bounce. So it comes down and bounces, it goes up, This keyframe, I'm going to make an easy ease, and I'll go into the graph editor, slow it down a little bit by pulling these out, and maybe pull it out a little bit up here in the composition window. Then go on down. As it hits here, I'm going to go into keyframe interpolation, make them both linear, and so forth. And this one can be easy ease, and slow it down slightly. Now remember, in this case, I am in the speed graph, and then it comes down, we'll do linear, linear. Keyframe interpolation, we'll do linear, linear. And then as it rolls out, I'm going to do easy, ease in, and go into the graph editor and slow that down quite a bit. And I'm thinking I probably have to move it out a little bit. So let's play this now and see what it looks like. Not bad. And then we can add a blur to it by clicking. First you have to activate the blur by clicking this button right here, and then in the blur column for the layer, turn it on. So now we've got a little bit of a blur as it moves through the animation.